I'm Rachel Burton. You can call me Rach.
How did you get started making videos on social media?
It was less of a conscious decision and more something that just naturally happened to me because at that time, about 2.5 years ago, I was going through marriage difficulties with my ex-husband. I looked to social media. Why not set up an Instagram? At that time, it was just for my friends, not really for the public. I knew I had something to say, but what? I wasn't sure, so I started by talking about intermittent fasting, and slowly I realized that talking about anything was really healing for me. So why not try to express how I feel there? I started discussing relationships and how they change. My husband and I had been together for 20 years, since high school, so I talked about how we evolved and how that impacted me. A lot of my friends shared that they were having similar experiences. I was surprised, but it prompted me to share more, and it resonated. It was really random, and it just snowballed from there. But it's been a really healing process. I don't see myself stopping anytime soon.
You leave the audio on in almost all of your videos. Can you explain why?
I had a situation where I met someone hearing in person, and they were shocked that I made noise when I signed. They seemed to think that because deaf people don't speak, we're completely quiet. Really? You're shocked? I asked more, and they said I am the first deaf person they met in real life, but not their first deaf person on social media. But the videos they see are muted by the deaf creators. That's where they got this idea that deaf people are quiet until they met me and realized they were wrong. That hit me. Until then, I had always removed sound or covered it with music. Often, the music would be the wrong choice for the video anyway. It took up so much mental space to think about the sound and music. I decided to do away with it and to show the real me. I think that gives people a better understanding of what real deaf people are like and sound like. ASL, it is not. It's visual, obviously, and there's also noise involved like lip smacking and clapping. Leaving the sound on shows the real me. It's become one of my goals to leave it every time, unless there's other people, like in a public space, and maybe there's sensitive information I can't control. But if it's just me, I leave the sound.
Where do you find information and strategies for yourself as a neurodivergent person in a neurotypical world?
A lot of it is research, reading, and talking with people too. My counselor also helps me a lot. There isn't one strategy that fits everyone, but I take pieces from different strategies out there to make my own. For example, with my ADHD, I require a strict daily morning routine, also because of my autism. If something interrupts that morning routine, it can mess up my whole day. No matter how much I tell myself, it's okay, it's fine, the rest of the day is fine, it still really messes with my head. Can you repeat the question? Ironically, we're talking about ADHD, and I lost my train of thought. So strategies, I read a lot. Most video content out there is already in spoken English, so I read the captions. When I find strategies that I really like, I research them further. Then I try to figure out how I can present them to the deaf community in ASL. That's really it. When I'm looking for strategies for myself, I try to identify what will benefit our community, and I share it, and sometimes I keep some for myself too.
Have you always been open about your neurodivergent identity?
No. Social media helped me be open about it. Before I started on my platform, I knew I had ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was 28 years old, which is late. When I got on social media, I started seeing other content creators talking about their ADHD, and I realized they were naming symptoms I have, but it still didn't feel like they were fully describing me. And then I started seeing content about autism, and I thought, that sounds kind of like me too. But neither of them described me fully. Then I found ADHD. Now that's what I call myself because both fit, autism and ADHD. That made me more confident in opening up and expressing myself. Because now, well, before then I was confused. Why do I think this way? Why am I like this? Now I have an answer, a term for it that I can stand strong in. I think being open about it is good for the community. Make this content accessible in ASL. All the content I see online is hearing people. It's spoken. Sometimes there are captions, but it's not the same as ASL. So that's why my passion is there.
Can you tell us a little more about being diagnosed later in life?
For me, ADHD was a clear, straightforward diagnosis because I had a clear list of symptoms that pointed to ADHD, but autism was more complicated. The diagnosis process in general can be complicated. The person testing you might not be familiar with deaf people or how deafness might factor in. The little things. As a child, I was mainstreamed. I was the only deaf child. And now, looking back, many of my ADHD and autism symptoms were overlooked because I'm deaf. Like if I was in class and unfocused, looking around, teachers attributed it to my deafness, but really it was likely the ADHD. One year in elementary school, my IEP had a note saying I needed to stop doodling on my desk and papers. Why was that in my IEP? They thought it was a deaf thing, but it's not really. There was so much overlap, it was hard to tell which impacted which behaviors. That complicates diagnoses.
How do you feel about your diagnoses of autism and ADHD?
I think for me, having this neurodivergent identity makes it easier. As a neurodivergent person in the world, if I had no label, I would be fumbling through it. But now that I have a label, I think it really depends on how you look at it. For me, it's really good to have a label, but a lot of people resist it because it doesn't fit their needs. I feel I really grew after I unmasked. I don't have to work as hard at fitting in or making sure people view me a certain way. It always felt like everyone had a manual to life that I was missing. But now that I'm unmasking, it feels like it's okay for me not to have it. I can tell people I don't have the manual, and they accept that. They accommodate me, and it's easier. I don't have to work so hard, and my energy is better.
Do you have advice for neurodivergent people trying to accept themselves?
I'm still navigating my own identity, my neurodivergence, my getting divorced, becoming a single mom, transitioning from stay-at-home mom to looking for a full-time job. All of that, I'm still navigating. I don't have all the answers. And I think it's important for us and for neurotypical people, but especially neurodivergents, to know the difference between belonging and fitting in. Neurotypical people expect everyone to fit in. And so we sort of force ourselves to, for example, when you're in high school, the most important thing is to fit in, right? And then when you become an adult, you start to realize it's not actually about fitting in. It's belonging that matters. So you start to make that shift. People do ask me, how do I make that shift? How do I find where I belong? I know the answer is not always clear, but if you aren't sure, you have to focus on sharing your truth, on being real, and you will attract people who feel the same way, who understand your perspective. When you all come together, that is where you belong. It's a process that every neurodivergent person has to go through, moving on from fitting into belonging, and from there, accepting yourself.
What advice would you give to young deaf people who want to follow your footsteps?
If you look at my first video, I am very straight-faced, like a robot, which could partially be the neurodivergence. Regardless, if you scroll through my profile, you can see me change in ways I never dreamed of. So just start, who knows what will happen. It's important to recognize that the best players in their fields tend to be more understanding of beginners. They know that everyone starts somewhere, and they're usually happy to give you advice about starting. People who boast themselves may not be understanding. The experts know you have to be a beginner at some point and are more open. If you reach out to a pro and ask for advice as a beginner, they're usually happy to give it. If someone asked me, I would be happy to give you advice on how to start. But really, just start, period.
This program was made possible in part through funds from the Genesee Valley Council on the Arts and the New York State Senate.